Finally, classically Abby has decided to use her platform for good rather than for evil. Toward the end of a 10-minute video that otherwise is filled with her usual brand of subtle yet dangerous toxicity. I want to give my full support for her public service message on breast cancer awareness. It is a serious health issue in my family just as much as it is in hers. At first, I was a bit concerned about whether or not she would have the moral courage to stick to that message in the event that some orangutan in chief decided to politicize it. But a quick Google search seems to suggest that her position on masks shows that, at least in the area of common sense health measures, she has that redeeming quality. Unfortunately, there are other things in her video that ooze of her usual subtle toxicity, and I, unfortunately, am going to have to call those out, beginning with a very toxic false equivocation that she makes with regards to the January 6th insurrection by Trump loyalists. And in order to avoid the complete mess of reviewing her video out of sequence, I am going to have to call out those toxicities first. Now you might be thinking, hey Sophia, she did condemn the insurrection, so what are you complaining about? I will explain in just a moment. Hello, Internet. This is Sophia, the Red Angel, doing my best on this channel to bolster social justice and the general betterment of society through the powers of logic, reason, and respect for evidence. If you like that, then subscribe to this channel, ring the bell, share, and comment. Anywho, after having gone silent for the better part of a week after the insurrection by Trump loyalists on January the 6th, classically Abby is back at it again. She has a new video out, at the end of which she actually has a message that I support. Unfortunately, there is a lot else in the video that really needs to be called out, and to avoid the total mess that would come from reviewing the video out of sequence, I am going to have to call out the other stuff first.
If you are new to my channel, The Scoop is our opportunity to chat, act as if we're grabbing a cup of coffee together, and go over the events of the week.
No, it is not. This really is far from being the most serious problem with classically Abby, but I am still sick of how every time she does an episode of The Scoop, she makes this analogy. It is not like grabbing a cup of coffee together and catching up. There are indeed internet technologies that are far more analogous to grabbing a cup of coffee and catching up, such as Zoom, Google Hangouts, even Skype. But when a group of people grab coffee together, there is not, or at least should not be, one person who is doing all the talking. So please stop saying that that is what The Scoop is, because it is not.
So I want to start off today by talking about something really serious that happened this past week and has been on all of our minds.
Yes, it is something that is on my mind too. Lots of people's minds. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say that if there is someone on whose mind this has not been weighing heavily, that person is obviously living under a rock.
The biggest piece of news from last week is about MAGA extremists storming the Capitol as the Electoral College was about to elect Joe Biden president.
Thank you for confirming, yes, we are indeed talking about the same thing.
This was a terrible day for our country because the seat of our democracy and everything this country stands for was trespassed upon in an illegal and riotous act.
It was not just a riotous act. It was an actual bona fide, clear-cut attempt at a coup. Not just a riot, but an insurrection. And it was not just illegal. It was also very grossly immoral. And no, the two are not the same thing. Something could easily be one without being the other. Under British law at the time, I am pretty sure that the signing of the Declaration of Independence was illegal, and I am absolutely certain that the decision of many colonists to take arms against King George was illegal by the same standards. Yet I would be very surprised if you were to lump that together with the insurrection of January the 6th, 2021. Under the laws of the Third Reich, it was very, very illegal for the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto or for the Jewish partisans in the forest to take arms against the regime. But I do not think that you would want to lump that together with the January the 6th insurrection either. Deep down, you know, just as I do, that illegal and immoral are not the same thing.
Let's be clear. Riots are never okay.
Riots are always a scary thing, yes. Riots should never be the first go-to solution for resolving disagreements. There I agree completely with you. But let us consider a thought exercise. These insurrectionists were operating under the false premise that the 2020 election had been illegally stolen from them, that votes had been suppressed, and that suppression had taken the victory away from Trump and given it to Biden. This narrative, of course, has been investigated repeatedly and has been proven beyond any even remotely reasonable doubt to be completely false and baseless. But here is the thought exercise. Let us suppose, hypothetically, that these premises were in fact true. Let us suppose that the election had really been rigged as they describe. Then what would you have suggested that these people do? Should these people go and vote out those who had disenfranchised them? In this hypothetical scenario, that voice would have been taken from them, so it would be ludicrous in that hypothetical scenario to suggest that that should be the recourse. If their premises were true, then hypothetically, the only option available to them would be to riot and do whatever they could to have the power of their vote restored. Of course, that all is hypothetical, as their allegations of vote suppression and voter fraud have been thoroughly debunked. And unlike you, my condemnation of this insurrection is predicated upon the baselessness of those allegations. Instead of taking your position of issuing a blanket condemnation of all riots, no matter where and no matter when, I instead take the position that epistemology matters. You know, I really should consider creating an animated effect for that, just like I have for Fallacies Exposed, but I digress. At any rate, understanding that epistemology matters is important, because otherwise there is no way to avoid lumping a violent attempt to overthrow democracy like we saw on January the 6th, together with people exercising a last resort measure to save or restore democracy. And as such, I must call you out for the fact that as much as you may have condemned the riots that broke out in the U.S. Capitol, nowhere in your entire video did you condemn the demagogues and propagandists that filled their heads with the lies that caused them to do so. Not even a mention.
What we won't allow to happen is for the media to paint all conservatives as responsible for what happened, or to say that we are all like the mob of thugs that stormed the Capitol.
And I do not know who is making such assertions. I assure you completely, I do not hold the Lincoln Project responsible for the January 6th insurrection. They are quite conservative, and I have my serious disagreements with them. But they are not insane traitors like Trump or his mob of supporters that invaded the Capitol. Likewise, I also do not hold Mitt Romney responsible for any of those events. I have serious disagreements with his positions, serious ones. But I know full well that to hold him responsible for the insurrection or to lump him together with those who are would be wrong on so many levels. But if you are trying to suggest that Trump, Giuliani, and others who incited the mob are not responsible for what happened, then you are completely full of excrement. So I seriously hope that that is not what you are trying to suggest. And unless it is, you might want to make a video condemning them just to clear things up.
But the rest of this video will be a little bit more lighthearted.
Not just more lighthearted. I have listened to the rest of your video, and the rest of it is far less problematic than what I have just finished reviewing. And at the end of the video, you even finish it up with a message for which you have my full support. Too bad you stuck that at the end of this video and started with such a problematic message and follows up with lesser problematic statements.
I recently watched the show Bridgerton.
I've only seen the very beginning of the series, the first episode or so, and as such cannot respond to your comments on it as informedly as if I had seen the whole thing. That said, there are a few things that you say about the show that I can respond fairly confidently to, despite having seen just the beginning. And there are a few things that you say that are about the world, not the world of the show, but our world, that I also feel need to be responded to.
I will say that the show is not family friendly. There are quite a few inappropriate scenes that don't necessarily need to be in the show, but they are.
Well, yes, I have to agree. It is not what would generally be considered family friendly. Then again, not everything needs to be. There does, of course, exist debate on how sheltered children should or should not be. But since, from the little bit of the show that I have seen, the assessment of this particular show being not family friendly does not seem to be based on any hypocritical double standard, so I am not going to argue with you about that. That said, as for your commentary that the inappropriate scenes and how they don't need to be in the show, I assume that you are referring to the sex scenes. Frankly, those scenes do not seem to be gratuitous at all, and there really isn't much more of them than is needed in order to establish certain aspects of what is going on.
Besides that, I thought that the show was very enjoyable to watch.
From the little that I have seen of this show, I am not going to disagree. And though so far I have only seen the beginning, I may very well end up watching the rest of it. But there is a thing or two that you say that I do not feel that I need to wait till I have seen the whole show to answer.
I will say, though, that one thing that does annoy me in these shows and in movies is the stuff about corsets. Corsets were not torture devices. They were kind of just like bras.
I believe you are here referring to a scene that is practically the opening scene of the very first episode, in which a young woman is having a corset pulled around her waist so tight as to constrict her breath. And frankly, even if not always, during certain time periods, corsets often were strung so tightly as to have this effect. True, they may not have been invented specifically for this effect, but the fact that during certain time periods they were often pulled so tight despite the fact that people must have known of this effect, shows that at least in those time periods, they were willing to do something adverse to the health of these young women. And what for? For an unreasonable beauty standard. But that is right. Corsets were not an inherently bad thing in and of themselves, but at certain times in history, the way that they were used did in fact demonstrate something that was truly messed up in society. And frankly, as for your comparison of corsets to bras, when a bra is worn so tightly as to constrict the flow of blood to the arms, that is not a good thing either. And if your bodily dimensions do not fall within a certain range that the fashion industry sees as worth accommodating, it can become increasingly difficult to find a bra, let alone a flattering one, that will not do such a thing. Again, as with corsets, this does not make bras an inherently bad thing. But once again, the way that they get used or the way that their production is directed does demonstrate messed up things about our society today, such as the tendency in capitalism for a demographic to be deemed unworthy of accommodation if it does not constitute a large enough share of the market.
Depending on the era, that was not the case, especially in the Regency era when you were wearing dresses that did not cinch in at the waist at all. So there would have been no point to wearing a corset that was shaped that way.
Okay, from what I gather, Abby is correct on this point. Though there were indeed times when corsets were worn so tight as to make it difficult for a woman to breathe, it does indeed seem like the Regency period was not one of those time periods. But anyways, so far it seems like Abby is managing to keep her toxic attitudes out of her commentary on Bridgerton. Too bad she is about to drop that ball.
And this show had an interesting premise in that one of the women in the show, the main character in the show, just wants to be a mother.
Just wants to be a mother? Again, I've only seen the beginning of the series, but from the little I have seen, it is clear that a far more accurate description is that she prefers becoming a wife and mother over the idea of being consigned to spinsterhood, which is the only alternative that she sees available to her.
And I thought the idea that a woman is longing to start a family refreshing.
You find that refreshing? Refreshing that a woman is in a position in which the only two options she sees before her are A, marriage and motherhood, and B, being consigned to spinsterhood? The fact that you find it refreshing that a woman is in such a precarious situation is where your usual toxicity is rearing its ugly head in your commentary on this series.
Because in today's day and age, you don't always get that narrative.
That is right. Today we have come to realize that for women to have options of some kind of autonomy in life is actually a good thing. Well, at least some of us have come to realize it, but not everyone. Apparently, you have not come to see things that way. Anyway, at this point, Abby goes on to discuss 2 house cleaning shows and even a cookbook before finally getting to the last segment of her episode where she finally gives a message that is free of her usual toxicity.
So I'm actually having surgery next week. So the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I think it is really important for us as women to be open about how important it is to get your breasts checked for cancer.
A message that I agree with wholeheartedly. No criticism at all there, except that you should have started off with this valuable public service announcement instead of burying it at the end of a video that is otherwise full of toxic messages. But I am still glad that at least you are making this public service message. It is a very important one. No rebuttals there at all.
My aunt actually passed away from breast cancer when she was in her early 40s. She was really young.
My mom had breast cancer too, and she is not the only one in the family who has had it. Fortunately, she survived it and is still alive today. And I am sorry about your aunt. And for all my disagreements with you, no matter how intense, I wish you well on your surgery. We are not friends, but in this case, I wish on you the same thing that I would if we were. A speedy yet thorough recovery.
Now, thank God this is not cancerous. It's just something that needs to be removed.
I am glad to hear that, because for all our disagreements, I do not wish on you anything as horrible as cancer. And I thank you for making the public service announcement, letting your audience know about the importance of checking yourself for breast cancer. And I admit I probably am not as good at checking myself as I ought to be. To learn more about early detection of breast cancer treatment, etc., visit the American Cancer Society's page on that topic, which is linked to in the YouTube video description area of the video that you are now watching. We all should check that page out, myself included. Also, since I do not know the gender breakdown of my audience, I should point out that while breast cancer is predominantly a female ailment, it is not exclusively so. It affects and even kills men too. The American Cancer Society has a page specifically dedicated to that as well. Anywho, I hope that you all enjoyed this video. Please hit the thumbs up button and leave your comment in the comments area below. Make sure that you are subscribed to this channel and that the bell icon is active so as to increase the chance that you receive notifications when I upload new videos to this channel in the future. Share this video with your friends and everyone else, whether by social media or by whatever other means. And until next time, see ya!